The old farmhouse stood silent as headlights cut through the fog. Boots crushed dry soil. A gun clicked. Inside, an elderly woman slowly set down her teacup. Her hands didn't shake, because the men outside thought she was weak. They had no idea she had once ended wars from a mile away. Everyone in the valley knew her as Auntie Mara, the quiet elderly farmer who sold vegetables at dawn and returned home before sunset. She wore faded clothes, her back slightly bent from years of labor, her face lined with age and silence. To strangers, she looked invisible. To the gang watching her land from a distance, she looked like an easy target. They had come for her property. The land sat between two major routes, perfect for illegal transport. No witnesses, no resistance, or so they believed. Mara noticed the unfamiliar tire tracks days earlier. She noticed everything. Years of survival had trained her eyes to read the earth like a map. She said nothing, but that night, she locked doors she hadn't locked in decades. As she watered her crops the next morning, memory stirred, dusty deserts, cold metal, voices barking commands. She pushed them down. That life was buried. She was done with violence. But when the black SUV stopped at her gate that evening, something inside her went still. 3 men stepped out. Young, careless, smiling. "Evening, Grandma," one said mockingly. "We just want to talk." Mara looked at their hands, their posture, their confidence. She sighed quietly. They thought she was afraid. They were wrong. The men didn't notice how Mara positioned herself. Back to the house, eyes never leaving them. She invited them in with a calm nod, the kind that confused people expecting fear. Inside, the house smelled of herbs and old wood. Photographs lined the walls, all carefully chosen. None from her past. They spoke fast, careless, explaining deals she never agreed to. Their leader leaned back in her chair, boots on her table. "You don't need all this land," he said. "Sign it over. We'll be generous." Mara poured tea slowly. Her hands were steady. That unsettled them. "I've buried 2 husbands," she said quietly, "and a son." The room fell silent. "I've signed many papers in my life," she continued. "Most of them sent people to die." They laughed nervously. She stood, walked to the window, and stared into the dark fields. The wind shifted. So did her breathing. She remembered the first shot she ever took. The distance, the stillness, the responsibility. Turning back, her eyes hardened, not with anger, but with certainty. "You should leave," she said. The leader scoffed and stood, reaching for his gun. That was the moment Mara knew. They had come too far, and she would not run again. The gun never left its holster. Mara moved first, not fast, not loud, just precise. She knocked the man's wrist aside and stepped back, already calculating angles, exits, terrain. Years fell away from her like dust from an old coat. The men froze, shocked by her strength. "Outside," she ordered. Her voice carried command, not fear. They backed out, confusion replacing arrogance. Night had fully settled now. Crickets chirped. The field stretched wide and open. Mara locked the door behind her. From a hidden panel beneath the floor, she retrieved a long, wrapped case she hadn't opened in years. Her hands paused on the latch. Regret flickered, then resolve. She moved through her home with practiced silence, positioning lights, opening windows, controlling sightlines. This was no longer a farmhouse. It was terrain. Outside, the gang whispered nervously. Something felt wrong. They didn't hear her footsteps. They didn't see her silhouette rise to the loft. The rifle rested against her shoulder like an old memory returning home. She didn't want to kill, but she would protect what remained of her life. Through the scope, she saw fear finally bloom in their eyes. They had targeted the wrong woman. The first shot shattered the night, not aimed at flesh, but at the ground inches from the leader's foot. Dirt exploded. Panic followed. "Run!" someone yelled. Mara exhaled slowly, controlled, measured. She spoke into the darkness. "Leave. Now." Her voice carried authority shaped by wars long forgotten. They fired wildly, bullets hitting walls and trees. Mara moved calmly, repositioning, using shadows and silence. Each shot she fired disabled, warned, ended resistance without cruelty. She remembered her son's face, how he begged her to stop fighting, how she promised. Tears blurred her vision for half a second. She blinked them away. One man dropped his weapon and cried. Another fled into the field. The leader fell to his knees, shaking. Mara descended the stairs slowly, rifle lowered but ready. She stood before them, an old woman again, tired, breathing hard. "Violence takes everything," she said. "I know. I paid the price." She handed the rifle back into its case. "Go," she whispered, "and don't come back." They ran. Mara stood alone in the quiet, her body trembling, not from fear, but from memory. Dawn broke softly over the fields. Birds returned. The land remained hers. Mara sat on her porch, tea untouched, watching sunlight crawl across the soil. Her hands finally shook. She hadn't wanted this. She never did. Later that day, police arrived. Anonymous tip. No charges. No names. Just silence that evening. Mara visited a small grave behind the house. She knelt, resting her forehead on cool stone. "I kept my promise," she whispered. "I protected life." The world would never know who she really was, and that was fine. She was a farmer now, a survivor, a woman who chose mercy when she could, and strength when she must. The following days passed quietly, almost deceptively normal. Mara returned to her routine, watering crops at sunrise, feeding the chickens, mending fences that didn't really need fixing. To anyone watching, she was just an old woman clinging to habit. But inside, the night replayed itself again and again. She washed the porch where boots had scraped the wood. She scrubbed until her hands burned, not because of dirt, but because of memory. Each sound at night made her pause. Each passing vehicle tightened her chest. She hadn't slept well since. At the market, neighbors greeted her kindly. Someone offered help with her produce. Another mentioned rumors, men fleeing the valley, scared, wounded pride. Mara listened silently, eyes lowered, and no one suspected her. That anonymity felt heavy, back home. She opened an old wooden chest hidden beneath her bed. Inside were medals wrapped in cloth, photographs burned at the edges, and letters she never finished reading. She traced a name etched into metal. Her strength, once defined by numbers, distance, precision. She had been legendary once. Now she felt old. That night, she stood outside under the stars, breathing in cold air. She whispered an apology, not to the men, but to herself, for surviving when others hadn't, for carrying skills that could never truly be buried. "I only wanted peace," she murmured. The wind carried no answer. 2 days later, a knock came at her door just before dusk. Mara froze, not again. She reached for the door slowly, heart steady this time, senses alert. But when she opened it, she found a young woman standing there, early 20s, city clothes, eyes sharp but unsure. "I'm sorry to bother you," the girl said. "My car broke down nearby. I was told you might help." Mara studied her carefully. Fear? No. Exhaustion? Hunger? She nodded and stepped aside. Inside, the girl introduced herself as Lena, a journalist chasing a story about disappearing gangs and abandoned routes. She spoke nervously, sipping tea, watching Mara's hands. "You live alone?" Lena asked. "Yes," Mara replied. Lena hesitated. "People say someone scared them away." Mara met her gaze. Long calm. "People scare themselves," she said. That night, Mara let Lena sleep in the spare room. Against her better judgment, something about the girl reminded her of the son she lost. Curious, stubborn, reckless. Over dinner, Lena asked softly, "Do you ever regret the past?" Mara paused. "Every day," she said. "And yet, I regret surviving less than I regret not protecting what mattered." Lena didn't push. Some stories weren't meant to be written. In the early hours of morning, Mara woke to the sound of muffled sobbing. She followed it to the spare room. Lena sat on the bed, face buried in her hands. "I shouldn't be here," Lena whispered. "I keep chasing danger, like it proves something." Mara sat beside her, heavy bones sinking into the mattress. "I once believed danger gave me purpose," Mara said. "It doesn't. It only takes pieces of you." Lena looked up. "Then why did you survive it?" Mara stared at the wall, eyes unfocused. "So I could choose differently," she said. She told Lena parts of the truth. Not names, not missions, just the weight, the nights, the cost, the loneliness of being good at something that destroys. Lena listened quietly. "I think the world needs stories like yours," Lena said. Mara shook her head. "The world needs fewer legends and more kindness." That morning, Lena left with a hug that lingered. She promised not to write what she couldn't understand. Mara watched her drive away, feeling something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Not fear, connection. For the first time since the attack, Mara felt less alone with her memories. Weeks passed without incident. The land healed. So did Mara slowly. She found herself smiling more at the stubbornness of weeds, at the way dawn painted the sky. She spoke aloud sometimes, to no one, just to remind herself she was still here. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a simple note. "They won't come back. Thank you for letting us live." Mara folded the paper carefully. Her hands didn't shake this time. She walked to the grave behind her house and placed the letter there. "I didn't do it for them," she said softly. "I did it so I could keep being this." A farmer, a woman, someone who chose mercy. That night, she buried the rifle case deeper than before, sealing the ground above it, not because she denied who she was, but because she trusted who she had become. Strength, she realized, wasn't in pulling the trigger. It was in knowing when not to. The stars blinked overhead, indifferent yet constant. Mara slept peacefully for the first time in years. Spring arrived early that year. The fields bloomed wildly, untamed and bright. Mara worked among them, slower now, kinder to her body. At the market, children waved at her. Someone called her Grandma Mara. She didn't correct them point one evening. As she closed her gate, she paused, listening. The land was quiet, safe. She smiled. Her past would always exist, carved into muscle and memory, but it no longer defined her future. She had faced violence without becoming it again. She had protected without losing herself. And in doing so, she reclaimed something far more valuable than reputation or power: peace. One afternoon, as Mara repaired a broken fence, pain shot through her shoulder. Sharp, familiar, unforgiving. She lowered herself slowly onto the grass, breathing through it. The body never forgot, no matter how much the heart tried to move on. She remembered winters overseas, lying in snow for hours, waiting. Back then, pain was ignored. Now it demanded acknowledgement. That evening, she sat by the fire, rubbing ointment into her joints. The house creaked softly around her, alive with age and memory. She wondered how long she could keep doing this alone. Loneliness, she realized, wasn't silence. It was the absence of being needed. The next morning, she surprised herself by placing a notice at the market. Fresh produce. Help wanted. Paid fairly. People stared. Auntie Mara didn't ask for help, but growth required humility. By sunset, a young boy named Eli arrived, thin, shy, eyes tired from caring for a sick mother. He reminded Mara painfully of her son. "You can start tomorrow," she said gently. That night, Mara lay awake, heart heavy yet hopeful. Perhaps second chances weren't about erasing the past, but letting new life grow around it. Outside, the wind moved through her fields like a promise. Eli worked hard, despite his small frame. He listened more than he spoke, watching Mara carefully, absorbing every lesson. She taught him how to read the soil, how to listen to weather, how patience mattered more than force. You don't fight the land, she told him. You work with it. One rainy afternoon, Eli asked quietly, "Were you ever scared?" Mara paused. "Yes," she answered honestly. "But fear doesn't mean weakness. It means you care." She saw his shoulders relax. As weeks passed, the farm changed. Laughter returned. Meals were shared. Silence softened. One evening, Mara overheard Eli telling his mother, "She's strong, but kind strong." The word stayed with her. That night, Mara dreamed of her son, not dying, but smiling proud. She woke with tears and relief intertwined. She realized something then. Legacy wasn't about what you survived, it was about what you passed on. And for the first time in decades, Mara felt like she was building something instead of guarding ruins. Trouble didn't announce itself this time. It crept. Mara noticed it in broken branches, an unfamiliar cigarette butts near the tree lane. Someone was watching again. Not the same men. Different energy. Calculated. She didn't panic. She prepared. But differently than before. She contacted the local sheriff, not with fear, but clarity. She warned neighbors. She set lights, alarms, signs. Protection didn't always require isolation. When the watchers realized the land was no longer vulnerable, they vanished. No confrontation. No shots. Mara felt relief wash over her. Strength, she understood now, wasn't secrecy. It was community. That evening, she sat with Eli and his mother, sharing soup and stories. Warmth filled the house, not forced, not fragile. Mara smiled quietly. She hadn't fired a single shot. And yet, she had one. As summer approached, Lena returned. She didn't bring a camera. She brought bread. "I never wrote the story," Lena said softly, "but I changed because of it." Mara nodded. That was enough. They sat on the porch, watching Eli laugh in the field. Lena asked, "Do you ever miss who you were?" Mara thought carefully. "I honor her," she said, "but I don't live there anymore." Lena smiled. Some legends weren't meant to be known. They were meant to heal quietly. That night, Mara opened the old chest one last time. She removed the medals, the papers, the photographs. She wrapped them carefully and buried them beside the rifle. Deep, respectful final. "I remember," she whispered, "but I choose forward." She returned inside, heart lighter. Outside, the land breathed peacefully. Mara slept deeply, surrounded not by ghosts, but by purpose. Autumn arrived quietly, painting Mara's fields in gold and rust. The air carried a softness she hadn't felt in years. Each morning, she woke with purpose, not urgency, not fear, just intention. Eli grew stronger, more confident, his laughter filling spaces, once hollow with memory. One evening, Mara taught him how to aim, not a weapon, but his life. "Focus doesn't mean hardness," she said. "It means clarity." Eli nodded, absorbing every word. As they worked, Mara felt something shift inside her. She had spent most of her life ending things, threats, missions, enemies. Now she was beginning something, teaching, guiding, staying. Later that night, she sat alone, watching the moon rise. She realized she hadn't checked the perimeter in days. The instinct was still there, but it no longer ruled her. Peace wasn't forgetting danger. It was trusting the present. For the first time, Mara allowed herself to imagine growing old without constantly looking over her shoulder. The thought felt fragile, but welcome. She smiled softly. Winter brought illness to the valley. Eli's mother grew weaker, coughing through long nights. Without hesitation, Mara stepped in, cooking, cleaning, sitting beside the bed through exhaustion. Eli watched her with awe. "Why do you help so much?" he asked one night. Mara answered honestly, "Because once, no one could help the people I loved." She held the woman's hand, steady and warm. No weapons, no tactics, just presence. When the fever finally broke, relief flooded the small house. Eli cried openly, hugging Mara tightly. In that moment, she understood something profound. Saving lives didn't always look heroic. Sometimes it looked like staying. She felt closer to redemption than she ever had on any battlefield. News spread slowly through the valley. Auntie Mara wasn't just a farmer. She was a protector, not because she fought, but because she cared. Neighbors began checking on each other. The land felt watched over, not by fear, but by connection. One afternoon, Mara stood at the edge of her field, watching children play where violence once threatened. She closed her eyes, breathing deeply. This was what she had been fighting for all along. Not victory, peace. She whispered a quiet thank you. To the land, to time, to the version of herself that had survived long enough to change. Years later, Mara's hands grew slower, her steps shorter, but her presence remained strong. Eli eventually took over most of the farm. He listened, learned, protected, not with force, but with fairness. On her final winter, Mara sat by the fire, watching snow fall gently outside. She felt no fear, only gratitude. She had lived many lives, and finally, she had lived the right one. When Mara passed, the valley gathered quietly. No speeches, no medals, just soil, seeds, and silence. Eli planted a tree where she once stood watch. It grew strong, deep roots, wide branches. A legacy not of violence, but of strength transformed. Sometimes the strongest people are those who choose peace after surviving war. This story reminds us that true power lies not in destruction, but in compassion, protection, and second chances. If this story touched your heart, like the video, subscribe, and join our Heart Angels family.